Dear students of 9A and 9B, today's topic is the Renaissance, chapter number 11. Following points mentioned in the board, you see end of the Italian Renaissance. First point. Second, philosophy of humanism. Third, art. 4, impact of the Renaissance. And 5, influence of the political philosopher. First point, end of the Italian Renaissance. Italy, which had become a center of fashion, art, culture, and the Renaissance, it later on was invaded by various countries of Europe, and as a result of it, Italian Renaissance came to an end. The countries of Europe which attacked Italy, the countries of Europe that attacked Italy, these countries were France, Germany, Spain. They invaded Italy from time to time, and after their invasions, the Italian philosophers, the Italian artists, painters, architects, they all fled. They all left Italy gradually for which country? For France. So the image of the Italian Renaissance, the image of the Roman civilization was duly damaged by these three countries of Europe, France, Spain, and Germany. In Rome, Rome in 1526 was invaded by Spain and German troops. So it ended the role of the papacy. Papacy, who was papacy? Papacy was the great patron of Renaissance and art and architecture in Italy. So after the invasions of these two countries in Italy, France and Germany, the role of the papacy in Italy came to an end. Naturally, Italian Renaissance also was faded. The French Renaissance adopted many of its ideals and transformed it in its own style. Naturally, a number of distinguished people and personalities of Italy, the greatest artists, decided to shift their settlement from Italy to France, Italy to Germany, Italy to Spain, because they considered themselves to be powerful. That's why they decided not to be there. And most notable example was Leonardo da Vinci, the most eminent personality of Italy, left for France in the year 1516. So only these were the reasons, my dear students. Italian Renaissance came to an end. And next point, philosophy of humanism. Philosophy of humanism. Humanism was the most important characteristics of Renaissance. Humanism was the most important characteristic of Renaissance, but it was also a shift in focus from the blind faith of simple-minded people to the rationalistic people who depended on their arguments and rationalistic thinkings. As a result of it, the philosophical movement that celebrated humanity and life, it was due to the philosophical movement. Experienced people began to think rationally. And afterwards, what happened? Humanist education they accepted, which was based on the study of poetry, grammar, ethics, rhetoric. So the Roman thinkers in course of time applied them in various ways on the contemporary governments, and theologians, notably theologians like Erasmus, Martin Luther, challenged the Aristotelian status quo, introducing radical new ideas of justification and faith. And that's why it resulted in dissolution, it resulted in disintegration in the structure of a philosophical movement, or in the structure of radical movement. Why? Because of the thinkers who were totally dependent on their arguments, dependent on their rationalistic thinkings, based on study, based on arguments. They automatically decline. Automatically the old traditional faith and belief was declined, and ultimately some philosophers, some monks, they challenged it, but they were unable to do anything. Who were they? They were Martin Luther, Erasmus. They challenged, although they challenged that system, the new awakening in the field of Renaissance which came, but they challenged it, but they were unable to make them stop. Now art. Next point, art. Art. What is art? Art best reflected the change in the Renaissance attitude. The art also was affected by the change, by the newly introduced ideals, newly introduced attitude towards the concept Renaissance. Art was no longer used to teach people about religion and morality. It was a celebration of the human spirit, and in color and form, using secular and classical themes taken from Greek legends instead of leaves of saints. That's why the real emotions of anger, joy, each and every human feelings are expressed through the paintings of different painters. Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo looked at their work with an almost scientific interest. They also changed their views. They also changed their technique and method and style. And ultimately, they considered this dissection of a dead body to be desecration of God's creation. So artists use methods such as a new painting, which means making objects in the foreground smaller than those in the background to give the painting a three-dimensional perspective. Naturally, there came a remarkable change in the system of art and painting, which was done by distinguished painters, artists. So it also gave the desire to depict the beauty of nature, and by the artists, painters also was changed. They renewed with the works of Raphael. They renewed with the works of Leonardo. The new painters, new artists, they followed the footsteps of Leonardo da Vinci. They followed the footsteps of Michelangelo. They followed the footsteps of other distinguished painters, architects, and artists. So in Netherlands, a new flavor also was introduced by the work of Hugo van der Goes and Jan van Eyck. They also were influenced by the ideals of Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael. They presented their paintings on canvas with well paints showing nature. They gave importance to the paintings of nature. Why? Because they were fond of painting. They were fond of learning. They were fond of expressing their attitudes, their thinkings, their thoughts in presence of the nature. That's why in presence of nature they started creating their painting works, their style, and ultimately they followed the footsteps of Raphael, they followed the footsteps of Michelangelo, and ultimately they also became famous like the previous artists, previous painters, previous architects. Now, next point, influence of the political philosophers. A number of political philosophers also were influenced by the ideals of the distinguished painters, artists, distinguished architects. Since these architects, these architects, these artists, these painters changed their attitudes in creating their artistic style in their works, and wanted to show a new style of painting, new style of architecture, new style of arts. That's why they also were influenced by the writings of Niccolo Machiavelli. Machiavelli influenced them by his writings. Machiavelli also was influenced by the changing system of the society and encouraged a number of distinguished artists, a number of distinguished architects and painters. So, not only Machiavelli encouraged the artistic styles of the artists, painters, architects, but also encouraged the ideals, but also encouraged the kings, also encouraged the works of the government. The government also followed the technique, method of Machiavelli. Machiavelli showed the pathway of adopting a concrete policy for running a smooth government throughout the country. Machiavelli openly discussed about the role of the king, about the ruler of a country. Machiavelli criticized the ruler of such kind of ruler, of such temper, of such kind of ruler who do not play an important role in controlling the critics. In a state, so many critics would be there whose main work is to criticize the government policies, but the ruler has to understand this basic thing, and the ruler has to make them understand by means of his efforts, by means of his technique, by means of his method. So what method a ruler is supposed to adapt, what technique a ruler will take, so that all the critics would be silent, and they would not criticize the government policies, they would not criticize the government policies and the ruler. So the policy of Machiavelli influenced the rulers of Italy, the rulers of the world, and they all were influenced, they all were inspired by the writings of Machiavelli and other political philosophers. Up to this, my dear students, thank you.